Hello, friends. You're watching The Night Watchman, where every day you'll hear a brand new horror story that will send chills down your spine. But to keep bringing you these terrifying tales, we need your love and support. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's begin the story. I never believed places could hold on to pain until I took the night manager job at the Redwood Pines Motel outside of Ely, Nevada. At the time, I was 28, broke, recently divorced, and trying to outrun the kind of grief that follows you into every quiet room. My father had died 6 months earlier after a stroke, and my marriage collapsed almost immediately after the funeral. My ex-wife, Jenna, used to tell me I carried sadness around like a second skin. Maybe she was right. That winter, I packed everything I owned into a rusted Ford Explorer and drove west until the highways became emptier than my thoughts. I answered a listing online for a motel night manager position. Free room included. No experience needed. The owner, Walter Griggs, interviewed me over the phone. "You okay working nights alone?" he asked in a gravelly voice. "I prefer it," I told him. There was a long silence before he replied. "Most people don't." I should have paid attention to the way he said that. The Redwood Pines Motel sat nearly 15 miles outside Ely on Highway 50, surrounded by dead desert brush and black mountains that looked sharp enough to cut the sky. It wasn't one of those bright tourist motels you see in postcards. It was old, built sometime in the 70s. 2 stories, faded green paint peeling off the railings. Half the neon letters on the sign no longer worked, so at night it read, Red Uyu Pin Motel. Walter met me in the parking lot the day I arrived. He was in his late 60s, tall, thin, with nicotine-stained fingers and tired eyes that never held contact very long. He showed me the office, the storage room, and finally the small employee room behind the front desk where I'd be sleeping during the day. "There's usually only 3 or 4 guests a night," he said. "Truckers mostly, sometimes hunters." Then his face tightened. "And stay out of room 12. I laughed a little. "Why?" "Maintenance problems." "That bad?" "Yes." Something about his answer felt rehearsed. I noticed the key for room 12 hanging separately from the others behind the desk. Unlike the shiny silver keys for the other rooms, this one looked old and dark, almost burned. Walter caught me staring at it. "Seriously," he said, "don't rent it. Don't go in it." That was the first moment I felt uneasy. The first week passed quietly. Most nights were dead silent except for the hum of the soda machine and the distant sound of trucks passing on the highway. I'd drink burnt coffee, watch old TV reruns, and occasionally check in exhausted travelers. But strange things started happening around midnight. Every single night. It began with the phone calls. The office phone would ring exactly once around 12:13 a.m. Whenever I answered, all I heard was breathing. Not normal breathing. Wet breathing, like someone struggling to breathe through fluid. The first few times, I assumed it was a prank caller. "Hello?" Nothing. Just that horrible breathing. Then click. One night, I got annoyed. "Listen," I snapped, "if you're going to keep calling, at least say something." The breathing stopped. For a second, there was complete silence. Then a woman whispered, "He's inside again." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver for nearly a minute. I checked the caller ID. Room 12. I felt my stomach tighten. The room was supposed to be empty. I grabbed the master key and walked outside. Cold desert wind whipped across the parking lot. Every room was dark except room 7, where an old trucker named Ray was staying. Room 12 sat at the far corner of the second floor. No lights, no sound. I climbed the metal staircase slowly, hearing it creak beneath my boots. When I reached the door, I noticed something strange immediately. The door was slightly open, just an inch. I was sure it had been locked earlier. "Hello," I called. No response. I pushed the door open. The room smelled awful, like mildew mixed with something rotten underneath. The wallpaper peeled from the walls. The carpet was stained black in several places. A broken lamp lay on the floor beside the bed. But the weirdest thing was the bathroom. The light was on and the shower curtain was closed. I don't know why my heart started pounding so hard. Maybe instinct. Maybe fear recognizing something before the brain does. I stepped closer. Anybody in here? Nothing. I grabbed the curtain and pulled it back. The tub was empty, but written across the tile in dripping red letters were the words, "He watches you sleep." I stumbled backwards so fast I nearly fell. Then I realized the writing wasn't blood. It was rust-colored water leaking from the ceiling. I left immediately and locked the room. The next morning I confronted Walter. "You told me room 12 had maintenance issues," I said. "What the hell happened in there?" Walter froze while pouring coffee. For a few seconds he didn't answer. Finally he sighed. "A woman died there." "How?" "She disappeared first." "That doesn't answer my question." Walter rubbed his face nervously. "Her name was Melissa Crane. Stayed here in 1998 with her husband." He lit a cigarette with shaky hands. 3 days later, husband checked out alone. "What happened to her?" "He said she ran away during the night." "And?" Walter looked directly at me for the first time. 6 months later, highway workers found pieces of her body buried in the desert. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Jesus. The husband vanished before police could arrest him. Walter took a long drag from his cigarette. After that, people started complaining about noises from room 12. "What kind of noises?" "Crying, scratching, someone talking inside the walls." I laughed nervously. "You actually believe that?" Walter didn't smile. 3 employees quit because of that room. That night I almost packed my things and left, but I needed the money, and honestly, part of me didn't fully believe the story, until the guest in room 7 disappeared. Ray had checked in around sunset. Big, heavy-set guy, Vietnam veteran, friendly, spent an hour talking to me about his grandchildren. Around 2 a.m., I heard screaming outside. Not loud, muffled, like someone trying desperately not to scream. I rushed outside. Ray's truck door stood open. His room door swung slowly in the wind. The TV inside blasted static. "Ray!" I shouted. No answer. Then I heard it. Footsteps above me. Slow. Dragging. I looked up toward the second-floor walkway. A figure stood near room 12. Tall. Motionless. Watching me. At first I thought it was Ray. Then the figure tilted its head too far sideways, farther than any human neck should move. I froze. The hallway light flickered once, and the figure was suddenly gone. I ran upstairs. Room 12's door stood wide open again. Inside, the bathroom light glowed. Drip, drip, drip. The shower curtain moved slightly, like someone breathing behind it. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I pulled the curtain open anyway. The tub was empty, except for Ray's boots. Perfectly placed side by side, still wet. Police came the next morning. They searched the motel, the highway, the desert. No sign of Ray. The sheriff questioned me for over 2 hours. "You sure he didn't just leave?" "He wouldn't leave his truck," I said. The sheriff looked exhausted. "You'd be surprised what people leave behind out here." Before leaving, he pulled me aside quietly. "You should quit this place." "Why?" He glanced toward room 12. "You know this isn't the first disappearance connected to that motel?" That sentence stayed in my head all night. I started researching online afterward. Over the next few days, I uncovered things Walter never told me. 5 people had disappeared from Redwood Pines Motel since 1998, all connected to room 12. All vanished at night. No bodies ever found except Melissa Crane. I confronted Walter again. This time he looked terrified. "You need to stop digging," he whispered. "People are disappearing." "I know." "Then tell me the truth." Walter's eyes filled with something worse than fear. Guilt. Finally he said, "The husband came back." A silence filled the office. "What?" "After Melissa died, he came back every year." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Walter leaned closer. "He rents room 12 for one night, every November." "That's impossible. I've seen him." "When?" Walter swallowed hard. 3 nights ago." The blood drained from my face. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." Then Walter reached beneath the counter and handed me an old newspaper clipping. The photo showed a man being escorted by police in 1998. Tall, thin, hollow eyes. I felt my stomach drop. I recognized him instantly. He'd checked into the motel 2 nights earlier under the name Daniel Brooks. Room 9. I remembered him perfectly now. Quiet, polite, mid-50s, gray jacket, and the worst part? He'd smiled at me. I sprinted to room 9, empty, bed untouched, bathroom dry, but carved into the wooden nightstand were words so deep they splintered the wood. She still cries at night. I called police immediately. But when officers searched the motel, there was no sign of the man. No fingerprints. No registration papers. Nothing. Almost like he'd never existed. That night became the longest night of my life. A blizzard rolled across the highway after midnight, knocking out power across the motel. Everything went black. No lights, no TV, no heat, just darkness and wind screaming outside. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks on the office door. I grabbed a flashlight. "Who's there?" No answer. Another 3 knocks. I opened the door carefully. Nobody outside. But muddy footprints led across the parking lot, toward room 12. I followed them. My flashlight shook in my hand as snow blasted sideways through the air. The footprints ended at the open doorway. Inside the room, darkness swallowed everything. Then I heard crying, a woman crying softly, from the bathroom. I stepped forward slowly. "Melissa?" The crying stopped instantly. Then a man's voice whispered behind me. She wouldn't stay quiet. I spun around. The man from the newspaper stood in the doorway. Older now, but unmistakably the same face. His clothes were soaked with snow, and blood stained one sleeve. "You," I whispered. He smiled weakly. "You ever hurt someone so badly," he asked softly, "that they never leave you alone afterward?" I backed away. "You're supposed to be dead." "I tried." His eyes drifted toward the bathroom. "She keeps calling me back." The bathroom light suddenly flicked on by itself. The shower curtain began moving violently. Something slammed against the inside of the tub. Again, again, again. The man started crying. "I buried her 6 miles north," he whispered, "but she came back anyway." The curtain ripped open, and for one horrifying second, I saw a woman standing inside the tub, skin gray, eyes swollen black, mouth stitched shut with wire. Then the lights exploded. Glass shattered everywhere. The room plunged into darkness again. I ran. I don't even remember getting downstairs. I locked myself inside the office and waited for sunrise with a shotgun Walter kept under the desk. When morning finally came, police found room 12 empty. No man, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. But in the bathtub, officers discovered something hidden beneath years of rust and grime. Human teeth. 7 of them. DNA later confirmed they belonged to Melissa Crane. Walter shut down the motel 2 weeks later. He killed himself 3 months afterward. They demolished Redwood Pines Motel the following spring. Today, nothing remains there except cracked concrete foundations buried beneath desert sand. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about the final thing I saw before fleeing room 12. As I ran out the door, the stitched-mouthed woman in the bathtub slowly raised one finger and pointed directly behind me, as if something else had been standing there the entire time, watching. Story 2. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as the rain hammered the windshield of my rental car, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. It was late October, and I'd been driving for 14 hours straight from Chicago toward Las Vegas for a sales conference that could make or break my career. My name is Alex Harper, 34, divorced and bone-tired of motels that smelled like regret and stale cigarettes. But this one felt different the moment its neon sign flickered into view through the sheets of water. Whispering Pines Motel. Vacancy. The sign buzzed weakly, the letters pulsing like a dying heartbeat against the black Nevada sky. I'd pulled off I-15 hours earlier than planned because my GPS had glitched somewhere near the old mining towns outside of Caliente. No other lights for miles, just endless desert scrub and this single-story L-shaped building crouched under a cluster of scraggly pines that looked like they'd been planted decades ago and forgotten. I parked under the awning by the office and killed the engine. The rain eased just enough for me to make a dash inside. A bell above the door jingled, sharp and lonely. Behind the counter sat an old man with skin like cracked leather and eyes that seemed too alert for someone his age. His name tag read Earl. "Evening," he said. his voice carrying a faint southern drawl that didn't match the desert. "Room 12, last one left. Cash or card?" I slid my credit card across the counter. "How long has this place been here?" Earl smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Since '58. Built it myself after I came back from Korea. Folks say the pines whisper at night. Old Indian legend or some nonsense. You want the Wi-Fi password?" I took the key, a real metal one, not a plastic card, and headed to room 12 at the far end of the building. The parking lot had only 3 other cars: a dusty pickup, a beat-up sedan with California plates, and a black van with no plates at all. Strange for a place this isolated. The room smelled clean enough, but there was an undercurrent of something metallic, like old pennies. I dropped my bag, peeled off my wet jacket, and collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was firmer than expected. For the first time in hours, I felt my shoulders relax. That's when I noticed the photograph on the nightstand. It was old, black and white, showing a young couple standing in front of the motel. The man looked like a younger Earl. The woman was beautiful, with dark hair and a smile that seemed too wide. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "Earl and Margaret, opening day, 1958. She never left." Weird. I set it face down and checked my phone. No signal. Typical. I drifted off around midnight, the rain now a soft patter against the window. I woke to whispering. Not the wind. Actual words. Soft, female. Right by my ear. Stay. Please stay." I bolted upright, heart slamming. The room was pitch dark except for the red glow of the digital clock. 3:17 a.m. I fumbled for the lamp. Nothing moved. The air felt thicker, colder. I told myself it was a dream, the kind that lingers after long drives and bad coffee. But when I lay back down, I heard it again, clearer this time. It came from the wall behind the headboard, the one shared with room 11. "He's coming. Don't let him see you." I pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. Then a soft scratching, like fingernails on plaster. I knocked once. No response. Maybe the occupant was asleep, or maybe it was just old pipes. I couldn't shake the unease. Grabbing my jacket, I stepped outside for some air. The rain had stopped, leaving the lot glistening under a half moon. The black van was gone. Only the pickup and sedan remained. That's when I saw the woman. She stood at the edge of the pines, maybe 50 yards away, wearing a white dress that looked soaked through. Her back was to me. Long dark hair hung down her back. For a second, I thought she might be a guest who'd wandered out. But something about the way she stood, perfectly still, as if listening, made my skin crawl. "Hey," I called softly. "You okay?" She didn't turn. Instead, she walked slowly deeper into the trees until the shadows swallowed her. I should have gone back inside. Instead, curiosity and that salesman's stubbornness pulled me toward the pines. The ground was muddy, sucking at my shoes. The trees were sparse but twisted, their needles brushing my face like cold fingers. I walked for maybe 2 minutes before I found it. A small clearing, and in the center a grave. Not an official one. Just a mound of dirt with a wooden cross made from 2 pine branches tied together. Fresh flowers, white lilies, lay on top. No name, just a date carved roughly. October 29th, 1958. The same year the motel opened. I backed away, pulse racing. As I turned, I saw flashlight beams cutting through the trees near the motel. 2 figures. One was Earl, moving with surprising speed for his age. The other was a tall man in a dark jacket I didn't recognize. I crouched behind a tree and watched. They stopped near the grave. Earl said something too low to hear. The other man laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Then they both looked in my direction. I ran. Back in room 12, I locked the door and shoved the dresser against it. My hands shook as I searched for my phone. Still no signal. The landline in the room was dead. That's when the whispering returned, louder now, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "He killed me, Alex. He killed me right here." My name. She said my name. I spun around. The photograph on the nightstand was now face up again. But the image had changed. The woman, Margaret, was alone in the photo, staring directly at the camera with hollow eyes. Earl was gone from the picture. A loud knock rattled the door. "Mr. Harper?" Earl's voice, calm and polite. "Everything all right in there? Thought I heard you yelling." I stayed silent. Another knock, harder. "Open up, son. We got a problem with the pipes. Might flood your room." The scratching started again, this time from inside the closet. Slow, deliberate, like something dragging itself across the floor. I grabbed the desk lamp as a weapon and backed toward the bathroom. The whispering grew into overlapping voices, multiple women now. "He buries us under the pines. Never leave. Your turn." The knock became pounding. The doorframe cracked. I slammed the bathroom door shut and locked it, then climbed into the tub, gripping the lamp like a club. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Wild eyes, pale face. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. I heard the main door splinter open. Heavy footsteps crossed the room. The closet door creaked. Earl's voice inches from the bathroom door now. "Margaret always liked the new ones. Said they reminded her of me when I was young. Full of life. Full of blood." I swung the lamp blindly as the bathroom door burst open. Something cold and wet grabbed my ankle. Fingers, definitely fingers, and yanked me down. I hit the tile hard. In the faint moonlight coming through the small window, I saw her. Margaret. Her face was the one from the photo, but decayed, eyes, milky white skin hanging in strips. She smiled that same too-wide smile. Behind her stood Earl holding a rusted hunting knife. "You shouldn't have looked under the pines," Alex Earl whispered. "Now she wants you to stay forever." I kicked desperately, catching Margaret in the chest. She shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and I scrambled up, smashing the lamp into Earl's face. Glass shattered. He roared and slashed wildly, catching my arm. Hot blood spilled down my sleeve. I burst through the broken main door into the night, sprinting toward my car. The other two vehicles were gone. Only mine remained. Keys, where were my keys? They were still in my jacket pocket, thank God. I jammed them into the ignition as Earl and Margaret emerged from the room, moving unnaturally fast. Margaret's white dress trailed behind her like a shroud. The engine roared to life. I floored it, tires screaming on wet asphalt. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing in the middle of the lot, watching. Earl raised a hand in a slow wave. Margaret tilted her head, smiling. I drove for miles without stopping, blood dripping onto the seat. The wound on my arm wasn't deep, but it burned. Dawn was breaking when I finally saw highway signs for Las Vegas. I pulled into a truck stop, shaking, and called the police. 2 days later, after stitches and a police report that sounded insane even to me, I sat in my Las Vegas hotel room watching the local news. A reporter stood in front of the Whispering Pines Motel. Tragedy struck this remote motel last night when longtime owner Earl Whitaker was found dead in one of the rooms, apparently from a heart attack. Police are investigating reports of a guest who fled the scene covered in blood, but so far no identification has been made. The motel has a long history of strange occurrences, including several missing persons cases dating back to the 1960s. Neighbors say Earl lived alone since his wife Margaret disappeared in 1958. The camera panned to the pines. I froze. In the background, standing among the trees, was a woman in a white dress. She looked straight at the camera, at me, and smiled. The broadcast cut to commercial. That night, my new hotel, I woke to whispering again. "You left me, Alex, but I'm coming with you." The photograph from room 12 was on my nightstand. I never took it. Margaret stared back at me, alone in the frame. I burned it in the sink. The ashes smelled like pine needles and blood. But this morning, as I packed to fly home, I found another photo in my suitcase. This one showed me standing in front of the Whispering Pines, smiling beside Margaret. Earl was nowhere in sight. On the back, "Welcome home, Alex. We never leave. I'm writing this on the plane." My arm still burns where Earl cut me. The flight attendant asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. But every time the plane hits turbulence, I hear the pines whispering my name. They know where I live. Story 3, I never believed places could remember people. Not until I stayed at the Black Hollow Motel. Back in October of 2019, I was 32 years old and driving across northern Arizona after the worst year of my life. My father had died from a heart attack that spring. My girlfriend Olivia had moved out 2 months later, and I'd just quit my job at a small newspaper in Phoenix after realizing I couldn't sit behind a desk pretending everything was normal anymore. I figured a long drive through the desert might clear my head. It didn't. By the third night, I was somewhere outside a dying little town called Mercer Springs. The roads stretched endlessly through empty desert land, and rain hammered against my windshield so hard I could barely see the yellow lines anymore. My gas tank was nearly empty. My phone had no signal, and the storm was getting worse. That's when I saw the motel sign. Black Hollow Motel Vacancy. Half the letters flickered weakly in the rain. The place looked ancient. One long row of rooms, cracked pavement, rusted railings, a soda machine glowing near the office like a lonely blue lantern. I should have kept driving, but I was exhausted, so I pulled in. The parking lot was empty except for an old dark green pickup truck parked near room 9. Rainwater pooled around my tires as I stepped out. The air smelled like wet dirt and something rotten underneath it. The office door creaked open before I even knocked. An old woman stood behind the counter. She looked about 70, thin gray hair, deep wrinkles, eyes so pale they almost looked white. "You need a room?" she asked. Her voice sounded dry, like paper scraping together. "Yeah, just for the night." She stared at me for several seconds before sliding a key across the counter. "Room 17. I glanced toward the row of motel rooms. "I didn't even tell you how many nights." "You'll only stay one." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. I forced a laugh. "Hope so." She didn't smile. "Do not leave your room after midnight," she said quietly. I blinked. "What?" "The storm brings things close to the motel." I waited for her to laugh, to tell me she was joking. She didn't. Instead, she handed me the key and looked past me toward the rain outside. "Lock your door." That should have been enough to make me leave. But when you're tired enough, your brain starts ignoring warning signs. So I grabbed my bag and walked through the storm toward room 17. The room smelled old. Not dirty exactly, just abandoned. The wallpaper peeled near the ceiling, and the lamp beside the bed buzzed faintly whenever I turned it on. A small TV sat on a dresser across from the bed, but it only showed static. Outside, thunder rattled the windows. I took a shower, changed clothes, and tried calling Olivia out of habit, even though I knew she wouldn't answer. Straight to voicemail. I sat on the edge of the bed listening to the storm and thinking about how strange life becomes after losing people. You start driving nowhere. You sleep in forgotten motels. You pretend you're moving forward. Around 11:40 p.m., I heard footsteps outside. Slow, crunching across wet gravel. I looked through the curtains expecting to see another guest. Instead, I saw a man standing under the flickering parking lot light. He wore a dark raincoat and stared directly at my window. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he wasn't moving, not even in the rain. I pulled the curtain shut immediately. A few seconds later, 3 knocks hit my door. Not loud, just deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Another knock came, then a man's voice. "Can you help me?" My chest tightened. There was something wrong with his voice. Not threatening, not angry, just emotionless. Like someone reading words off paper. I slowly walked toward the door but stopped before unlocking it. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, "My wife is hurt." I looked through the peephole. Nobody. The walkway outside was empty. Rain poured from the roof. That was it. I stepped back immediately. Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to open that door. Then the voice came again, this time right beside the window. "Please." I spun toward the curtains. A shadow moved behind them, tall, standing inches from the glass. I grabbed the motel phone and dialed the office. The old woman answered immediately. "I told you," she whispered. "There's someone outside my room. Do not open the door." "What is happening here?" The line went silent for a moment. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "He asks every night." A loud bang hit the window. I nearly dropped the phone. Another bang followed, then scratching, slow scratching across the glass. I pulled the curtain open for half a second. The man stood there smiling. I finally saw his face, His skin looked swollen and pale from rainwater, and his eyes were completely black. Not dark brown, black, like empty holes. I stumbled backward in horror. The lights flickered, and suddenly the scratching stopped. Complete silence filled the room. Even the storm outside sounded quieter. Then came footsteps again. But this time they weren't outside. They were above me. Heavy footsteps pacing slowly across the ceiling. Room 17 was on the ground floor. There was no second floor. I felt every hair on my arms rise. The footsteps continued, back and forth, back and forth. Then they stopped directly above the bed. A deep thud shook the ceiling. Dust drifted down. Another thud, like someone dropping onto all fours. I backed against the wall, barely breathing. Then came a sound I still hear in nightmares. Breathing, right above me. Wet, slow, animal-like. I grabbed my keys and rushed for the door. I didn't care what the old woman said anymore. I unlocked it and sprinted into the rain. The parking lot was empty. No man, no footsteps, nothing. I ran straight toward the office. The old woman opened the door before I reached it. "You opened the door," she said softly. "I had to." She looked terrified for the first time all night. "You need to leave now." "I'm trying." She grabbed my arm tightly. "Do not stop driving, no matter what you see on the road." Lightning flashed outside, and for a split second I saw someone standing behind her inside the office hallway. Tall, motionless, watching me. I jerked backward. "What the hell is that?" The old woman turned, but nobody was there anymore. When she looked back at me, her face had gone pale. "Go!" I didn't argue. I sprinted through the rain, jumped into my car, and peeled out of the motel parking lot so fast my tires skidded across wet pavement. The motel disappeared behind me into darkness. For the first 10 minutes, I drove without thinking, just breathing hard and gripping the wheel. Rain slammed against the windshield. Thunder echoed across the desert. Then I noticed headlights behind me. A truck. Old, dark green. The same truck from the motel. My stomach dropped. It stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind me. No matter how fast I drove, I pressed harder on the gas. The truck matched my speed. Its headlights filled my mirrors. Then slowly, it began getting closer. I could finally see the driver. The same man from outside my room. His face looked pale and stretched unnaturally wide. And he was smiling. I hit 90 miles an hour. The road curved sharply through desert hills, rain making everything nearly invisible. Still, the truck stayed behind me. Closer, closer. Then suddenly, its headlights vanished. Just gone. I checked every mirror repeatedly. Nothing. The highway behind me was empty. I kept driving another 30 miles before finally stopping at a gas station near Flagstaff around dawn. I must have looked insane because the cashier asked if I needed help. I told him about the motel, about the old woman, about the man. His expression changed immediately. "You said Black Hollow Motel?" "Yeah." He stared at me for several seconds. "That place burned down in 1998. My heart stopped. "What?" "Electrical fire. Killed the owner and several guests." I laughed nervously. "No, I was literally there tonight." The cashier slowly shook his head. "There's nothing out there anymore except ruins." I didn't believe him, so after sunrise I drove back. Part of me needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. The storm had passed by then. Clear skies, quiet desert roads. But when I reached the area where the motel should have been, there was nothing. Just a burned-out foundation surrounded by weeds. No rooms, no office, no sign, only blackened rubble. I got out of the car slowly, unable to breathe properly. Then I saw it. Near the remains of the old parking lot stood a rusted pole with faded room numbers barely visible beneath soot. Room 17. I backed away immediately, and that's when I heard footsteps behind me. Crunch, crunch. Slow footsteps on gravel. I turned around. Nobody. But hanging from my car door handle was an old motel key. Rusty, wet, attached to a cracked plastic tag. I drove away and never went back. A few months later, I researched the motel online. The fire happened during a thunderstorm. According to an old newspaper archive, one guest kept knocking on doors after the fire started, trying to warn people. But smoke filled the hallways before anyone could escape. Most of the bodies were burned beyond recognition, including the man who had gone room to room asking for help. Sometimes I still wake up at night hearing those knocks, slow, deliberate, waiting outside the door. And every October, during heavy storms, I receive strange voicemails from unknown numbers. There's never any sound at first, only static. Then eventually, a man's voice quietly says, "Can you help me?" Story 4. I pulled my battered Ford pickup off the desolate stretch of Highway 50 in central Nevada, just as the sun bled out across the Alkali Flats. The GPS had died an hour earlier, and my phone showed nothing but roaming bars. I'd been driving from Reno to Denver for a new job. Nothing glamorous, just warehouse work that paid enough to start over after the divorce. Exhausted, I needed a bed that wasn't the driver's seat. That's when the neon sign flickered into view. The Sagebrush Haven Motel. It looked too good for this nowhere stretch of desert. Clean white stucco walls, fresh paint on the doors, flower boxes with actual blooming desert roses under each window. A glowing vacancy sign hummed softly. The online reviews I'd glimpsed before losing signal had been 5 stars across the board. Best hidden gem on the loneliest road in America. Feels like home. The owner, Mrs. Harlan, makes the best coffee. No complaints. Just perfect. I killed the engine and stepped out into the cooling night air. A bell jingled as I pushed open the office door. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 50s, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a faded floral dress. Her smile was warm, almost maternal. "Evening, traveler," she said, her voice carrying a soft southern drawl that didn't quite match Nevada. "I'm Eleanor Harlan. You look like you've come a long way. Room 12 is our best. Quiet, faces the hills, fresh linens. $28 for the night." That price was impossibly low. I handed over cash, signed the register as Mark Reynolds, and took the key. As I turned to leave, I noticed an old black and white photo on the wall behind her. A younger Eleanor standing with a man and a teenage boy in front of the motel. The boy looked uneasy, staring off camera. "Family?" I asked. Her smile tightened for just a second. "Used to be. My husband passed in '98. My son, he went missing a few years later. Desert does strange things to people. But don't you worry. You're safe here." Room 12 was immaculate. King bed with thick comforter, modern TV, even a little kitchenette. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something metallic underneath, like old pennies. I showered, ate a protein bar, and crashed hard. Around 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of whispering. Not wind, actual voices, soft, overlapping, like people talking just outside the window. I sat up, heart thudding. The curtains were still. I peered out. Nothing but empty parking lot and the dark outline of sagebrush hills under a half moon. Probably coyotes, I told myself, or the desert playing tricks. I fell back asleep. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing outside my door. Eleanor had left a thermos and fresh muffins on the small patio table. "On the house," said the note. The coffee was perfect, rich with a hint of cinnamon. I ate, feeling strangely refreshed despite the broken sleep. Decided to stay another night. My back was killing me from the drive, and the thought of another 8 hours on the road felt impossible. That afternoon, I explored a bit. The motel had only 12 rooms, and mine was the only one occupied. Behind the main building was an old wooden shed with a rusty padlock. Through a cracked board, I glimpsed what looked like children's toys, faded plastic trucks, a doll with one eye missing, and stacks of old suitcases. Strange for a place this clean. Eleanor was in the office when I returned, flipping through a leather-bound guest book. "Quiet place, huh?" I said. "Most folks just pass through," she replied, not looking up. "But some decide to stay longer. The desert calls to them." Her words lingered as I went back to my room. I tried watching TV, but the signal kept cutting to static. In the static, for a split second, I thought I saw a boy's face. I shook it off as fatigue. Night 2 was when things shifted. I woke to scratching at the door. Not loud, just persistent nails on wood. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and opened the door. The concrete walkway was empty, but there were faint footprints in the dust leading from my room toward the hills. Bare feet, small, like a child's. They vanished after 20 yards. Back inside, I noticed something new. The closet door was open. I was sure I'd closed it. Inside hung a single denim jacket that wasn't mine. On the breast pocket was embroidered Tommy Harlan, age 14. My skin prickled. Tommy, the missing son from the photo. I took the jacket to the office. Eleanor was there, knitting by lamplight. "This was in my closet," I said, holding it out. She stared at it for a long moment, then smiled sadly. "Tommy's. He always left things behind. Don't mind it. The rooms remember their guests sometimes." "Remember? The desert takes people, Mark. But sometimes it sends them back, in pieces." She set down her knitting. "My husband built this motel in 1973 on what used to be an old stagecoach stop. Folks disappeared even then. Native tribes used to say this land sits on a thin place, between here and elsewhere. My Tommy wandered out one night in 2001. Said he heard his friends calling from the hills. We never found him, just his jacket and one shoe. I returned to my room uneasy but too tired to drive away in the dark. I locked the door, wedged a chair under the knob, and tried to sleep. The whispering returned, louder. This time I could make out words. "Stay. It's warm here. Mom makes good coffee." I turned on every light. The TV flickered on by itself, showing nothing but static. In the static, shapes moved. Human shapes, standing just behind where I was sitting on the bed. I spun around, nothing. At 4 a.m., I heard the knock. 3 soft raps on the door. "Who's there?" I called. A boy's voice answered, clear and close. "It's Tommy. Can I come in? It's cold outside." I didn't open it. I sat on the bed with the lights blazing until dawn. Morning 3, I packed my bag, determined to leave. But when I stepped outside, my truck's tires were flat, all 4 of them, slashed cleanly. Eleanor appeared with a sympathetic look. "Oh dear, the desert does that sometimes. Sharp rocks. I can call a tow, but it won't get here until tomorrow afternoon. Why don't you stay another night? Free of charge. I'll make you my special stew." I wanted to refuse, but the nearest town was 40 miles back, and I had no spare. Reluctantly, I agreed. That evening, after the excellent stew, which left me strangely drowsy, I confronted her in the office. "Tell me the truth. What really happened to Tommy?" Eleanor sighed and opened the guest book. She flipped to pages from years ago. Names, dates, room numbers. Many names repeated. People who had stayed multiple nights. "Some guests leave," she said quietly. "Some hear the call and join the others. The land is hungry. It took my husband first. Heart attack while he was out looking for Tommy. Then it took my boy. But it gives back. They come visit. They like new people. They get lonely." I laughed nervously. "This is some kind of joke, right?" She looked at me with genuine pity. "You've already drunk the coffee, Mark. 3 times now. It binds you, makes you part of the haven." I backed away and ran to my room. My phone still had no signal. I tried the landline in the room. Dead. As night fell, the whispering surrounded the entire building. Dozens of voices now. Men, women, children, all repeating the same thing. "Stay with us. It's better here. No more pain. No more driving. No more loneliness." I barricaded the door. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath fogged. In the mirror for a moment, I saw another face behind mine. A pale boy with empty eyes smiling. At midnight, the scratching returned, but this time from inside the walls. Fingernails on the other side of the drywall. The closet door creaked open again. More clothes hung there now. Shirts, pants, a woman's dress. All belonging to previous guests. All sizes. All with names embroidered. I grabbed a chair and smashed the window, ready to run into the desert. But outside, standing in a perfect line between me and the highway, were figures. Dozens of them. Men in trucker caps, women in nightgowns, children holding toys. All pale. All smiling that same welcoming smile. Tommy stood at the front, holding one shoe. Eleanor appeared behind them, walking slowly. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Mark," she called softly. "Your wife left you. Your job is dead end. Here you belong. The haven keeps its guests forever." I slammed the broken window shut and retreated to the bathroom, locking myself in. The voices followed, seeping through the vents. We were just like you, running, scared. Now we're home. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt slippery. My mind grew fuzzy. The stew, the coffee, something in them. I must have passed out. When I woke, it was morning again. The window was intact. My truck tires were full. The room was spotless, as if nothing had happened. No extra clothes in the closet, no whispers. Eleanor greeted me cheerfully at the office. Sleep well? You look rested. Breakfast is ready. I paid for the extra nights with shaking hands and drove away as fast as the old Ford would go. In the rearview mirror, the sagebrush haven looked perfect again. Neon sign bright, flowers blooming. I made it to Denver 3 days later. Started the new job. Tried to forget. But 2 weeks after that, I found a small denim patch in my jacket pocket. Embroidered. Mark Reynolds, room 12. Last night I woke to the smell of cinnamon coffee in my apartment and soft knocking at my door. A boy's voice whispered through the wood. It's Tommy. Mom says you can come home now. The desert misses you. Story 5. I never believed places could remember people until I stayed at the Pinecrest Motel outside of Gallup, New Mexico. Back in 2019, I was 27 years old and driving across the Southwest filming travel videos for a small YouTube channel that barely made enough money to cover gas. Before that trip, my life had already fallen apart once. I used to work construction in Phoenix with my older brother, Daniel. He was the kind of guy everyone trusted instantly. Loud laugh, huge shoulders, always buying drinks for strangers at bars. 2 years earlier, Daniel disappeared during a hunting trip near Flagstaff. No body, no witnesses, nothing. The police eventually stopped calling. My mother never recovered from it, and I guess neither did I. That road trip through New Mexico was supposed to help me clear my head. I spent weeks filming old diners, abandoned gas stations, forgotten highways, places most people drove past without noticing. That's how I ended up on Route 491 just after midnight during a thunderstorm. Rain hammered my windshield so hard I could barely see the lines on the road. Lightning kept flashing across the desert, illuminating miles of empty land and crooked telephone poles. My gas tank was almost empty, and my GPS kept losing signal. Then I saw the motel sign, Pinecrest Motel. The red neon letters flickered unevenly. Half the sign was dark. Vacancy. The motel sat alone off the highway with maybe 10 rooms total. One long, single-story building. Peeling white paint, rusted railings, a dead soda machine near the office. It looked abandoned. But one room had a light on. I pulled into the gravel lot, killed the engine, and listened to the rain pounding the roof of my truck. Something about the place bothered me immediately. There were cars parked outside several rooms, but no lights, no movement, no sound. I grabbed my backpack and camera equipment, then jogged through the rain toward the office. Inside smelled like old cigarettes and mildew. A television played static behind the counter. An elderly woman sat in a wooden chair reading a paperback novel under a yellow lamp. She looked at me over tiny glasses without smiling. "You need a room?" she asked. Her voice sounded rough, like she hadn't spoken all day. "Yeah," I said, "just for the night." She stared at me for a few extra seconds before sliding a metal key across the counter. Room 7. I signed the register while thunder shook the windows. That's when I noticed something strange. The guest book only had 3 names written in it for the entire week, yet there were at least 6 vehicles outside. "You got a lot of long-term guests?" I asked casually. The woman stopped turning her book page. "They keep to themselves." Something in the way she said it made me uncomfortable. I paid cash, grabbed the key, and headed back outside. Room 7 sat near the far end of the building. The porch light above the door buzzed constantly. My boots splashed through puddles as I unlocked the room. The first thing I noticed inside was the smell. Not rot, not mold, something metallic, like wet pennies. The room itself looked normal enough. Old floral bedspread. Tiny TV mounted in the corner. Cracked bathroom mirror. But the carpet near the bathroom looked darker than the rest, like something had soaked into it years ago. I told myself I was being paranoid. I dropped my bag beside the bed and turned on the television for background noise while charging my camera batteries. Outside, the storm got worse. Wind rattled the windows hard enough to make the glass vibrate. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my room. Slow footsteps, crunching on gravel. They stopped directly outside my window. I froze. The curtains were shut, but I could see the faint outline of someone standing there. Not moving, just standing, watching. I waited for a knock. Nothing happened. After maybe 30 seconds, the footsteps slowly continued down the walkway. I told myself it was another guess. Still, I locked the deadbolt. Sleep didn't come easy. At some point during the night, I woke to a strange sound. Dragging, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. I checked my phone. 3:17 a.m. The dragging noise came again. Closer this time. I slowly sat up in bed. Then I heard whispering outside. Two voices, a man and a woman. I couldn't make out the words. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked quietly to the window and pulled the curtain aside just an inch. A man stood beneath the flickering motel light wearing a dark raincoat. Beside him was the elderly woman from the office. Between them, they were dragging something wrapped in a stained blanket. My stomach tightened instantly. The shape underneath looked human. I stepped back from the window so fast I nearly tripped over my bag. Every instinct told me to call the police. But before I could grab my phone, 3 loud knocks hit my door. I stopped breathing. Another knock. "Sir?" the old woman called softly from outside. "Everything all right in there?" I didn't answer. Silence followed. Then slowly, very slowly, the doorknob began turning. The deadbolt held. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then her voice came again. "You should stay inside tonight." Footsteps walked away. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping a tire iron from my truck while staring at the door until sunrise. The storm finally stopped around 6 in the morning. As soon as daylight hit the room, I packed my things and hurried outside. That's when I noticed the gravel near room 10. Fresh drag marks, leading toward a maintenance shed behind the motel. The same shed I hadn't noticed during the storm. I looked around the parking lot. The cars from earlier were still there, but now I noticed something disturbing. Dust covered every windshield. Thick dust. Those vehicles hadn't moved in weeks, maybe months. A cold feeling spread through my chest. I walked quickly toward the office to return the key. The elderly woman sat in the exact same chair reading the same book. "You leaving already?" she asked. "Yeah." She nodded slowly. "Most people do." I slid the key onto the counter. That's when I noticed a framed newspaper clipping hanging beside the desk. The headline read, "3 tourists missing along Route 491. The article was dated 1998. Beneath it were photographs of the missing people. One of them looked exactly like the man I saw outside last night in the raincoat. Same face, same beard. My blood ran cold. "You okay?" the woman asked. I backed toward the door. "When was that picture taken?" She looked at the clipping calmly. "A long time ago. That man, he's here." For the first time she smiled. But it wasn't a normal smile. It looked tired, almost sad. "People pass through here," she said quietly. "Some leave, some don't." I got out of there fast. I practically ran to my truck. But when I tried starting the engine, nothing. Dead battery. My heart began pounding. I checked my phone. No signal. The motel suddenly felt impossibly isolated. Then I heard the maintenance shed door creak open behind me. I turned slowly. The man in the raincoat stood there staring at me from about 50 yards away. Except now I could see his face clearly. His skin looked pale gray. Water dripped from his clothes even though the rain had stopped hours earlier. And his eyes looked completely empty. More figures appeared behind him. A woman, a teenage boy, an older man wearing a trucker hat, all soaked, all silent. I stumbled backward against my truck. The old woman from the office stepped onto the porch behind me. "They stay because they can't leave," she said softly. "What are you talking about?" Her expression darkened. "This land used to flood years ago, before the highway changed routes. Cars washed off the road during storms." She paused. "People died here." The figure slowly moved closer across the gravel lot. "But that's impossible," I whispered. She looked at them with guilt in her eyes. I should have closed this place long ago. The raincoat man tilted his head toward me. Then I noticed something horrifying. His face. I'd seen it before. Not in the newspaper. In one of Daniel's old hunting photos. The same man had been standing in the background near the trees. My breathing stopped. What is this place? The old woman answered quietly. They bring people here. Lightning flashed across the desert again, though the sky had already cleared. For 1 second, I saw dozens of shadowy figures standing around the motel. Not 4, dozens, watching silently. Every missing traveler, every lost person, every soul trapped there. I jumped into my truck again and turned the key repeatedly. Nothing. The figures kept coming closer. Gravel crunched beneath their slow footsteps. Then suddenly, an engine roared behind the motel. A rusted pickup truck burst from beside the maintenance shed and slammed through the fence onto the highway. The distraction made every figure turn toward the sound, including the raincoat man. The old woman grabbed my arm hard. Now! I didn't question her. I shoved the truck into neutral, released the brake, and let it roll downhill out of the parking lot toward the highway entrance. Once the truck gained enough momentum, I popped the clutch. The engine exploded to life. I sped onto Route 491 without looking back. In my rearview mirror, I saw the motel getting smaller behind me, but the figures remained standing there, perfectly still, watching. I drove for nearly 2 hours before reaching the next town. At a gas station, I finally called the police and explained everything. They thought I was crazy. Still, a sheriff agreed to check the motel. 2 days later, he called me back. There was no Pinecrest Motel on Route 491, no building, no office, nothing except an empty dirt lot. The sheriff claimed no motel had existed there since the early 1980s after severe flooding destroyed it. I nearly hung up on him, but then he said something that still keeps me awake at night. Son, there was one thing out there, though. What? A maintenance shed. I couldn't speak. The sheriff continued quietly. There was an old pickup truck inside, rusted nearly beyond recognition. My hands started shaking. What does that have to do with anything? He paused. Human remains were found in the driver's seat. I closed my eyes. Who was it? The sheriff hesitated before answering. We identified him yesterday. A long silence followed. Then he spoke the name I hadn't heard in 2 years. Daniel Mercer. I dropped the phone. To this day, I still don't know what happened at that motel. I don't know how my brother ended up there. And I never found out who the old woman really was. But sometimes during heavy storms, I think about that night, about the figures standing silently in the rain, waiting, watching the highway, looking for someone else to bring back to the Pinecrest Motel. Story 6, I took the night shift at the Blue Lantern Motel. I never believed places could hold on to people. Not ghosts, not spirits, just pieces of them. The kind that stay trapped in the walls long after everyone else leaves. I learned that in the winter of 2017, when I took a temporary job at a dying roadside motel outside of Gallup, New Mexico. Back then, I was 28 years old, broke, exhausted, and running from a life that had already started falling apart. 3 months earlier, my younger brother Tyler had died in a drunk driving accident outside Albuquerque. He wasn't the driver. He was in the passenger seat. The man behind the wheel survived with a broken shoulder. Tyler died before the ambulance arrived. After the funeral, nothing in my life felt stable anymore. My girlfriend left because I had become impossible to live with. I stopped showing up to work at the auto shop. Bills piled up. Every room I entered reminded me of something I'd lost. So I left Phoenix with whatever fit into my truck and drove east without a plan. That's how I found the Blue Lantern Motel. It sat alone beside Route 491, surrounded by desert and dead silence. The motel sign flickered weakly in the dark, like it was struggling to stay alive. Blue Lantern Motel vacancy. Only half the letters worked. The place looked forgotten. 2 rows of faded doors faced a cracked parking lot filled with potholes. Behind the motel stretched miles of empty desert. No gas stations nearby, no restaurants, nothing, just darkness. I should have kept driving. Instead, I parked. Inside the office sat an older man in his late 60s watching a tiny television behind the counter. His name was Walter Grady. Tall, thin, gray beard, thick glasses. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You need a room?" "Yeah," I said. "Just for the night." He studied me carefully. "You looking for work too?" I laughed weakly. "Depends what kind." "Night manager." That immediately sounded bad. Walter explained the motel had lost 2 employees in 6 months. One quit suddenly, the other disappeared. He said business had slowed after the interstate rerouted years earlier. Most nights only 3 or 4 rooms filled. All you got to do is check in late guests and keep an eye on the place. "What happened to the guy who disappeared?" Walter stared at the television. "People leave." That was all he said. The pay was terrible, but the room was free. And at that point in my life, free sounded pretty good. So I stayed. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. Most guests were truckers passing through or couples looking for a cheap place to sleep. Nobody stayed longer than one night. The motel itself felt strange after midnight. Not haunted, just wrong. The hallways carried sounds too clearly. Pipes rattled inside the walls even when no water ran. Sometimes footsteps echoed outside rooms that were empty. I blamed the old building. Walter lived in a small apartment behind the office, though I rarely saw him after sunset. He always disappeared around 9 every night. One thing about Walter bothered me immediately. He hated room 12. Not disliked, hated. The first time I tried renting it out, he stopped me. "Don't use that room." "Why?" "Plumbing's bad." But 2 days later, I saw a cleaning woman come out of room 12 carrying fresh towels. Another time, I noticed the lights inside working perfectly. The room clearly wasn't broken. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I used the master key. Room 12 looked normal at first glance. Queen bed, small television, bathroom sink stained with rust. But the room smelled strange. Not rotten, more like damp earth after heavy rain. The wallpaper near the bed had deep scratches running vertically down to the floor, like someone had clawed at it. I remember staring at those marks when I noticed something else. There were locks on the inside closet door, 3 of them, heavy steel locks. I walked over slowly. My stomach tightened. Who puts locks on the outside and inside of a closet? Before I could inspect them closer, I heard footsteps outside. I turned. Walter stood in the doorway. I nearly jumped out of my skin. His face looked pale with anger. "I told you not to come in here. You said plumbing problems. You asked too many questions." Then he grabbed my arm harder than I expected for a man his age. "Stay out of room 12. I pulled away. "What the hell is your problem?" For a second, I thought he might actually hit me, but then his expression changed completely. Fear. Real fear. "Some doors shouldn't be opened," he whispered. Then he walked away. That night I barely slept. 3 nights later, the knocking started. 2:13 a.m. 3 slow knocks on the office window. I looked up from the paperwork. Nobody there. I stepped outside into the freezing desert air. Empty parking lot. Then I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the office. From room 12. The light inside was on. I froze. I knew for a fact nobody had rented it. I walked toward the room carefully. The curtain moved slightly. Someone was inside. "Hello?" I called. No answer. Then came another knock. From inside the closet. My entire body went cold. I should have walked away. Instead, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room felt freezing. Not normal cold. The kind that sinks deep into your chest. The closet door stood shut at the far wall. Knock. 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 I moved closer, slowly. "Who's in there?" Silence. Then a voice answered. A woman's voice. Very soft. "Please help me." Every hair on my arm stood up. I grabbed the closet handle. The locks were already undone. I opened the door fast. The closet was empty. Just darkness. But the smell hit me instantly. Wet dirt, and something metallic underneath it. Blood. I stepped backward immediately. That's when I noticed the floor. Fresh mud covered the carpet leading out of the closet. Footprints. Bare human footprints. They stopped directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. But the bathroom door was now open. I swear it had been closed before. The shower curtain moved slightly. I backed toward the exit. Then the woman's voice whispered again. right beside my ear. Don't let him lock me in again. I ran. I don't remember crossing the parking lot. I just remember bursting into Walter's apartment yelling at him. There's someone in room 12. Walter didn't even look surprised. He just sat silently at his kitchen table. Finally, he said, "You heard her." That sentence hit me harder than if he'd screamed. "You knew?" Walter rubbed his shaking hands together. Then he told me the story. 21 years earlier, the motel belonged to his brother, Raymond. Raymond was violent, controlling, paranoid. One winter, a young woman named Elise checked into the motel during a snowstorm. She never checked out. Walter claimed Raymond became obsessed with her. He believed she was stealing from him, spying on him, planning to leave without paying. One night during an argument, Raymond locked her inside the closet in room 12. He intended to scare her for a few hours, but he got drunk and forgot. 3 days later, Walter found her dead inside, dehydrated, curled against the corner wall. I stared at him in disbelief. "You called the police?" Walter's face twisted with shame. "No." "What?" "My brother buried her in the desert." I couldn't breathe for a second. "You covered up a murder?" Walter looked like he'd been carrying the guilt his entire life. He said it was an accident. I backed away from him slowly. "You're insane." Then Walter said something I still think about constantly. "She never left that room." I grabbed my keys and decided I was leaving immediately. I didn't care about money anymore. I threw my bags into the truck, but before I could start the engine, I noticed something horrifying. Every light in room 12 had turned on, and someone stood behind the curtain, watching me. Tall, unmoving. I told myself it was Walter. It had to be Walter. Then the figure slammed against the window hard enough to crack the glass. I jumped. The curtain fell aside. It wasn't Walter. It was a woman. Thin beyond belief. Pale skin stretched tight across her face. Dark dirt covered her arms. And her mouth. Her mouth had been sewn shut. I started the truck instantly, but the engine stalled. The motel lights suddenly went dark. Every single one. The entire property disappeared into blackness. Then came the screaming. Not one voice. Several. Echoing across the desert. I locked the doors and tried starting the truck again. Nothing. My headlights flickered weakly. And in that brief light, I saw people standing around the motel. Dozens of them. Motionless figures facing me from the darkness. My chest tightened so hard I thought I'd pass out. Then someone knocked on the driver's window. I turned slowly. Walter stood there. Except something was wrong with his face. Blood ran from his nose and eyes. "Don't let her out," he whispered. Then hands erupted from the darkness behind him. Human hands. They grabbed Walter and dragged him backward across the parking lot while he screamed. I heard his fingernails scraping the pavement. Then silence. Complete silence. My truck suddenly started. I slammed the gas pedal and tore out onto Route 491 without looking back. I drove nearly 80 miles before stopping. At sunrise, I called state police. They searched the motel that afternoon. Walter was gone. No blood, no signs of struggle. And room 12, completely empty. No scratches, no locks on the closet, nothing. The officers clearly thought I was unstable. One deputy pulled me aside and quietly asked if I'd been drinking. I left New Mexico the next morning. For years, I convinced myself exhaustion and grief had caused hallucinations. That's what I wanted to believe, until 8 months later. I was living in Colorado then, working construction. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, all I heard was static. Then a woman whispered, "Thank you for opening the door." The line disconnected. I changed my number the next day. 3 years passed. I never heard anything else. Then in 2021, while scrolling online late at night, I found an article. A hunter discovered human remains buried outside an abandoned motel near Gallup. Dental records identified the body as Elise Bennett, missing since 1996. The article included a photograph of the motel before demolition crews tore it down. The Blue Lantern Motel. But that wasn't what froze me. Standing in the upstairs office window was a figure watching the camera. A tall woman with pale skin. And even through the grainy image, you could clearly see the stitches across her mouth. I never went back. I never will. But sometimes Usually around 2:13 in the morning, I wake up hearing 3 slow knocks somewhere in my house. Knock, knock, knock. And every single time, I check my closet first.